Basically, I thought I was going crazy. I was trying to find the filter feature, which was added in the update 2 weeks ago with Odin and all that jazz, but I couldn't find it. I would switch to different world bosses, I would go to different content, I would do all these things, and I just could, I'd change up the teams around, whatever, and I could not find that little checkbox in the bottom that was supposed to show me different setups for teams, different leaderships, different dealers, different supports. And I went back to the patch notes to look at it, and oh yeah, it's definitely there, guys. It's definitely there. Under other improvements and changes, the filter feature. So I didn't have a fever dream where I imagined this, but it's definitely in the game, and it apparently is in multiple pieces of content: World Boss, Shadowland, Giant Boss Raid. I even went to the update video where 3RL showed us this in Shadowland. But I was tripping, dude, because when I went to Shadowland, nothing's there. And you may have done this yourself. Like, there's nothing here, bro. There's nothing here. When I press Ant-Man, nothing pops up at the bottom there. I was super confused until I started talking to people on Discord. Then I realized, I figured out very quickly that it only works if you click on the filter tab here to pull up this drop-down menu, and then you select either leader, dealer, or support. If you select anything else like speed, if you select search, right? If you select anything else, it does not work. But if you select leader, the pop-up appears. If you select dealer, the pop-up appears. And if you select support, the pop-up appears. Now, this is really cool, because then I can check this box, and boom, it's going to automatically get rid of some of the supports that it was showing me, because it knows that they don't apply to Ant-Man in this case. So if you quickly look at who's disappearing, you can see Shadow Shell, Green Goblin, and Rocket are disappearing, as well as Enchantress, Proxima, and War Machine. There are others that are disappearing, like I'm pretty sure Jane Foster disappears, and Wong disappears as well. Ebony disappears for a lot of different reasons. So it's actually a really good first example, because this goes to show you that there's a lot of thought going into this process. Actually, Groot disappears as well. So obviously, I can explain why these all disappear. But anyways, the short story is they disappear because they don't have supports for Ant-Man. But then you're looking at the ones that stay, right? Enchantress actually stays, which doesn't really make any sense. But then you realize she has an ability that gives all allies get mind damage and mind resistance. Now, the game probably knows that Ant-Man doesn't have any mind damage, but maybe the game thinks that I want the mind resistance. So it's not a perfect system. It can definitely suggest shitty options for you. Like, Enchantress is basically a useless support for Ant-Man. But that goes the same for Storm here, right? Storm is listed as a support for Ant-Man that they can use because of this passive, where all allies get 30% ignore dodge and 55% elemental damage. Now, the 30% ignore dodge is good, and it's certainly a lot better than you can get on certain other characters, especially if you don't have any supports. But on the other hand, you're wasting 55% elemental damage on a character like Ant-Man, who doesn't have any elemental damage. Now, if you notice, there's actually an even bigger mistake here with listed supports. Actually, Ebony being listed as a support doesn't make any sense either, because his support applies to universal enemies. So it seems like the game mode, it seems like this function doesn't read and doesn't look at what enemies you have that you're fighting against, because some of these abilities only apply in those situations, right? It seems like it works for Hela, checking if it's a superhero or super villain, and we can check this pretty straightforwardly by going to Quicksilver and then just queuing up a team here. We'll put Miles in, and then we'll go to support, and we'll check, and you can see that Hela is still there. However, it doesn't work in reverse. You can see there's still a bunch of supports here, like Shuri, for example. Her only support is damage increase to villains and damage decrease from villains. Quicksilver's not a villain, so it's actually very misleading to give players this list here. Some of these supports are accurate. Like, for example, the ignore dodge from Storm doesn't matter if it's a hero or a villain, right? Resistances from Blue Marvel doesn't matter if it's a hero or a villain, right? This one, in this case, is wrong again. But then you look at stuff like Cyclops, and I noticed this one. I was like, why do they keep showing me Cyclops? This doesn't make any sense. It's because the game doesn't know. The game classifies Cyclops as a support, and that's all the game needs to know. Now, again, the game does some things right. Like, they get rid of Chasm, right? You can see Chasm pops in and pops out, and so does Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay pops out because Wolverine's not universal. And then Chasm pops out because Wolverine is not Spider Sense. And we can test this pretty easily by swapping Wolverine for Molecule Man. And then when we hide there, Morgan Le Fay stays. Morgan Le Fay, other characters disappear like White Fox, but Morgan Le Fay stays because it's now universal. So that's pretty cool. But the rest of it is pretty darn bad. Like, seeing Cyclops here is so misleading. Super misleading. His support, and I know he has a support, but it's energy attack, right? It's all allies get energy attack. Venom and any other physical damage character has nothing they can do with energy attack. Like, it literally does nothing for them. So this is actually going to be misleading to some players who are going to see this and be like, oh, okay, I can use Cyclops as a support for my Venom. And then Venom doesn't do any more damage, then they're frustrated as to why things, aren't going the way that they're going. Now, an interesting thing here is it can also tell when there's multiple characters, so it doesn't get too confused. Like, you can see Polaris shows up, right? Whether I check it or not. She's in the top left-hand corner. But as soon as I get rid of Cyclops, Polaris is gone. Why? Because Venom is not a mutant. Now, this doesn't necessarily work if I go to Leader and I check it off. It works sometimes. It doesn't work every time. And again, it doesn't necessarily filter for effects that you can't use specifically. But as you can see here, Mephisto and Polaris and Icarus all disappear. That third row, Star-Lord disappears as well. So the game does have some way of checking. So this is where I think the system and the filter system is just not correct and not perfectly designed yet, because it knows for sure Venom is not a blast type. I don't know if it knows that Venom doesn't deal energy attack, like it doesn't scale with his energy attack, but it definitely gets rid of Star-Lord regardless. But it keeps shit like Odin, probably because the debuff passive applies to everyone, even though the lightning damage doesn't do anything for him. And, it keeps other characters that you're kind of just scratching your head. Like, again, why is it keeping Scarlet Witch here? Guys, seriously, please don't tell players to put energy attacking leaderships like Captain Marvel with physical attacking characters. And, of course, the reverse is true as well. If you do put an energy attacking character and you filter out, you're going to see physical attacking leads. That's actually an all-attack lead. Let's find a physical attack lead. Is Crescent still here? Crescent's still here. Yeah, that's unacceptable. Now, I think if you switch Crescent's uniform, she will disappear, because her old uniform only applies to combat types. You can see there, combat types. So now if I go ahead and check this off with lead, Crescent won't be here anymore. Yeah, Crescent's not here. So that is something that they are doing. They are checking the typing if it applies to the leadership, but that's it. They're not going any further than that, and they're certainly not investigating whether these physical characters deal, energy damage or whatever, vice versa. Like, what? Yeah. So it's definitely an incomplete system, but it's a pretty cool system. I'm not gonna lie. It does help quite a bit. And if you have characters that you're using, like, okay, I have Magneto, he's my lead, now I'm going to need some supports for him. And then you go ahead. Now, obviously, not all supports are made equally. Some are better than others, so that's sort of up to the player to go and investigate, right? If they do some shit like this, they're not really going to have a good time because they're barely getting any supports, versus if they go ahead and do something like this, they're going to have a great time, right? So obviously there is a bit of fine-tuning that needs to be done. It would be cool to maybe see a ranking or some sort of indicator for how popular certain characters are, so you can get a better clue, right? And they could even use that to sell characters by showing them in gray, like they do at the bottom here when you've used them, showing the character in gray, but then saying like, hey, this character has a very, very high usage rate as a support, or has a very, very high usage rate as a leader. Maybe you want to unlock them, you want to try to unlock them, build them up, whatever. So there's a lot of possibilities here to not only educate players and help them make better decisions for team compositions if they don't watch MFF University, but also to sell shit, right? Which is obviously their main goal with this game these days. So I do find this kind of stuff interesting. I also like breaking it because it's always fun to see how it's been constructed and what the flaws are in it. And it didn't take me very long to find some very obvious flaws in terms of the game not checking for energy attack and physical attack, and then not checking for enemies being, heroes or villains, right? So Like even something as simple as Dormammu increases basic damage to superhero faction. Okay, and it only applies to villain allies. So we're going to take a villain here like Mephisto, and we're going to sort here. So Dormammu appears. This is correct. He should appear here because Quicksilver is a hero. Boom, bada bing. You're going to get that big value, right? He's going to smash. But then you're going to go to a villain stage, like a very obvious villain stage. Okay, let's just go to Thanos, right? We know for sure Thanos is a villain, right? 100% Thanos is a villain, right, guys? Okay, very cool. So we're going to go dealer. We're going to go back to Mephisto. We're going to put him here. Then we're going to go to leader. We're going to check this box. Uh-oh, Dormammu's still here. Dormammu's lead, although it applies to Mephisto, it does absolutely nothing versus Thanos. So you're not actually getting any value. And that's obviously a mistake that needs to be rectified, because what the game is basically showing you right now is what leaderships will apply to the character. That's not really an important thing, right? Because not only does the leadership does have to apply to the character, that is important, but it also has to work against the boss, right? So yeah, cool system. I like the way it was designed, but it definitely needs some tweaks, and it definitely could use some enhanced features in the future. Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know if you use this feature in GBR, War Boss, or Shadowland, and how you find it, or if you just figured out that you had to do this because the patch notes were not clear at all whatsoever. Thanks so much for watching. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.